Welcome back. Well, since the end of the 1967 war, Israeli settlements have sprung up across the West Bank with little sign of stopping. Israel occupies East Jerusalem, but its claim on the land is not recognized internationally. There are currently 174 Jewish settlements across the West Bank. Last week, Israel announced it would build 1,300 new housing units in East Jerusalem, which the Palestinians view as their future capital. The announcement brings the number of homes Israel has approved for construction in East Jerusalem and the West Bank to more than 3,000 since the renewal of peace talks last year. While speaking in Jerusalem, U.S. Secretary of State Condoleezza Rice cited Israel's announcement to build further housing in the occupied territories as one of the barriers to the ongoing peace process.
It is an important time for the peace process, and I agree with you. The situation in the Middle East is always complicated, and so we mustn't let that deter us from seeking the solution to the crisis and to the conflict that you have been working toward. I've told the Foreign Minister that I will also raise the issue of settlements because I'm very concerned that at a time when we need to build confidence between the parties, the continued building and the settlement activity has the potential to harm the negotiations going forward.
We're still joined by our guests in Tel Aviv, Oren Yakovovich, in Ramallah, Wissam Ahmed, and in Jerusalem, Akiva Alda. Wissam Ahmed, you've heard Condoleezza Rice's comments. Danny Dayan, a settler head, said recently to the Jerusalem Post that it was impertinent and insolent for Rice to scold Israel for providing housing for its citizens in the heart of the capital. How do you think the Palestinians would respond to something like this? Because it seems as if Rice's criticism means nothing for the settlers.
Well, Rice's criticism and anyone else's criticism, if it's not followed by some sort of pressure, then the settlers and the Israeli government will continue to ignore any sort of initiative at stopping the settlement process. And what needs to be made clear is, regardless of the ideology of these settlers and the location of these settlements, all of these settlements and all of the settlers therein are illegal under international humanitarian law. And all of them, and their presence thereby constitutes a war crime under international law. And it's very important for us to realize that without any pressure being put on, specifically on the Israeli authorities, and by pressure, obviously, talking is not going to be enough. There needs to be action, and the action has to come in the form of direct economic pressure. And we've seen, unfortunately, the EU recently take the opposite approach and reward Israel with improved EU-Israeli relations, despite the fact that Israel continues to violate the human rights of the Palestinian people every day.
Oren Yakovovich, does B'Tselem want the Israeli government to evacuate all settlements?
Basically, we're not getting, as B'Tselem, we are information center and are not really getting into political question. We say that the settlements are illegal by the international law, and we want Israel to follow the international law. So all settlers should move out.
But that's unlikely to happen anytime soon, right?
No, I don't think so. But this is my personal opinion. You know, I don't think anything would happen soon. And it's kind of a game that I guess Israel played with the Americans. You saw it also with the relief on the checkpoint that they did in the last few weeks. They took some off, but some they got back quite immediately. I don't think so.
Akiva Alda, you and the other guests had mentioned that there needs to be more pressure on the Israeli government with regards to settlements. You know, it's completely against all agreed principles of international law. I wonder, what can be done? Does the UN Security Council have to come into the picture?
You know, it's kind of embarrassing for me even to explain why Israel's interest is that we will get pressure from outside, because it's our interest. if we want a two-state solution, if we want to have a Jewish state next to a Palestinian state, the settlements are the oxymoron of a two-state solution, according to our own Prime Minister's statement. So I would rather see the pressure coming from inside, from the inner circle of the Labour Party, of the Israeli liberal movements, from the Israeli public. Unfortunately, this is not happening. So what I expect is our friends in the United States, the friends of Israel, to tell us what's good. You know, sometimes you have to punish your own friend or to give him some instructions, some directions, and to help him to save himself from himself. And I think this is the clear case here, because nobody can convince me that the settlements are helping Israel to pursue its values, the Zionist ideas. It's just doing the opposite, and it will eventually bring us to a one-state solution, which will be the end of the Zionist vision. But you know, the problem is, look, you just mentioned the 1,300 units. I broke this story, and I'm very proud of this. When I called the deputy mayor of Jerusalem to get his response, he didn't even know what I was talking about. He said, but it's in Jerusalem. It's inside the municipal borders of Jerusalem. And I said, yeah, but this is behind the green line. It's not ours. He didn't know what I was talking about.
Well, that's a fascinating anecdote. Final question for Wissam Ahmed. We have less than a minute on the program. With Israel continuing to establish these facts on the ground, do you foresee more radicalization for some Palestinians?
Well, in the alternative to not having a hope for peace, there's a fear that that the people will turn to an alternative to peace. And unfortunately, this continuous establishment of facts on the ground and continuous building of settlements, which is the primary obstacle to peace, makes one question whether or not there is a desire for peace on the Israeli side. Because it's the settlements and the settlers themselves that prevent the largest obstacle to peace. Without these settlements illegally there in East Jerusalem and in the West Bank,
sorry to interrupt you. We've reached the end of the program. Wissam Ahmed, sorry to interrupt you. Gentlemen, thank you very much for your thoughts. Oren Yakovovich, Wissam Ahmed and Akiva Elder. And thank you so much, the viewer, for joining us here on this edition of Inside Story. Bye-bye for now.